What's up trainers, Jerpy's here, and in today's video, I'm going to walk you through what I believe is the absolute best deck, again, in the meta. This deck helped me get to a 95% win rate on a 20-1 record on the back of two separate 10-game win streaks that took me into Masterball and to well into the top 5,000 players rankings at the time. Now, of course, what deck am I going to be talking about? No other than Giratina Darkrai. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at some of the changes and updates that we've made to this deck. Before I get into how this deck works and some of the changes that we've made to it, I just want to say I highly recommend watching this video I made last month, walking through the ins and outs of how the deck comes together and exactly how to pilot it, since a lot of that has not changed. I also want to say that I'm a new content creator. My focus is to bring you deep analysis and kind of walk you through the ins and outs and nuances of piloting the top or best meta deck on the ladder. If you like content like this and want to see more of it, I highly recommend that you smash that like button below or subscribe to the channel. Now, with that said, let's talk about some of the key changes we've made to this deck in order to make it function and perform as well as it did in this current meta. So the deck really hasn't changed a whole lot since last month. We have a couple new tools that we want to be able to fit in here and some key changes that we made based off of some of the core breakpoints that have changed. So let's talk a little bit about what those are. The first one is that we dropped one of the Sabrinas that we had in the deck, because we were running two last month, for the Guzma. Now Guzma has become a really important card in really just about every matchup. It generally brings you value in removing those Pokemon tools in key moments so that you can either close a game out or it can give you that advantage or that edge over your opponent, primarily in the mirror, where it becomes really important. In addition, we've kind of swapped out the tools to lean away from kind of that higher breakpoint giant cape function where we were trying to stay above some of those really key breakpoints in last month's meta. And instead, we focused on things that actually create chip damage so that we can battle things like the Oricorios, where we don't have a lot of options against them besides the tools and the Darkrai chip damage. Those are primarily the main things that we've done here and kind of tweaking the deck to make it work. There's a lot of people that are running double Mars or even a red card with double Mars. And to be honest, I just think that that is way overkill. Now, I understand that you really want to try to disrupt all of these rare candy combo decks out there, but to be honest, I found that Mars usually does a good enough job of doing this early on when you get it. And to be honest, you don't really need to be focusing on disrupting those decks. You can actually just beat them by playing the deck the way it's meant to be played. And every once in a while, you might get lucky and get that Mars early on and be able to disrupt it. Or sometimes you may actually give them the cards that they're looking for. You never really know, and having 2 or 3 cards in your deck built all around this disruption, in my opinion, puts it at a disadvantage. Now, there are also people that are running things like a single Oricorio in this deck, or even a Komala, which is essentially trying to give you a little bit of an edge against the mirror, or even some of these like rare candy decks that are just running X Pokemon. And additionally, the 2 decks that give this deck the most trouble is the new Oricorio Greninja deck, in which they use a bunch of healing in order to give it that sustain against your chip damage. And having that kind of extra mon is used to kind of combat that. Now, I feel that having that extra basic in the deck just really ruins the consistency of what you need to make this deck work, because you need that Darkrai and you need that Giratina down ASAP so you can start getting them online, generally getting them to full energy at the same time. Now, I will say that the primary tech that's going to be used against you, and what I find are the only real 2 decks that give this deck trouble, is the Oricorio Greninja deck, where it's running the extra Shaman to power that health up on the Oricorios and give them that sustain against your Darkrai, essentially letting them last twice as long as they normally would by only taking really that 10 damage from the Darkrai's chip damage and just outlasting you. I find these matchups to be very difficult, and a lot of times will end up in a loss. You also have the Snorlax decks, or the decks that are using Ilma, in order to try to reset a lot of that damage that has been distributed out by your Darkrai, and in a lot of ways just kind of negating all of that chip damage and really making that whole buildup on your Darkrai not even matter. Now, as I said, these are going to be the biggest weapons used against you. Other than that, this deck, in my opinion, beats everything else in the meta, and a lot of times beats it pretty easily. So let's go ahead and look at some of the core matchups that you're going to face, some of those kind of key meta challenges, and walk through how to play against these things and how to tackle them. Getting to the first matchup here, we look like we're going to be going second, and we see Water Energy. And so this one's tough because we know there's a lot of decks running kind of dual energy, but seeing the Oricorio as the kind of lead Pokemon here, we kind of know exactly what deck this is going to be. It's going to be the Greninja deck, most likely with the Shaman. We see the Shaman go down, and we immediately want to start kind of game planning for how to play against this. Darkrai and its triggers and our tools are going to be the most important weapon that we have against this deck, and then using things like Sabrina and Cyrus in order to try to maybe snipe certain Pokemon in the back and really just kind of like weave through and get some build out those 3 prize points to get us to the finish line. So having the 2 Darkrai's first is actually really great here because the Giratina is something that we can, like, this game's going to take forever. This game is going to go 20 minutes. It's going to go to the very end. It's going to be grindy, and the Giratina, like, we'll have plenty of time to build 1, maybe even 2 Giratinas. They have so many opportunities to keep their Oricorio live that this just ends up being like a really, really grindy, slow matchup. Now, we're fortunate enough to see that they don't have another Pokemon on their bench, and so this leaves the Shaman very, very vulnerable to this Sabrina here. And so we actually want to pull that up now before they have the opportunity to actually put another Pokemon on the bench and just get some chip damage on it. This will allow us to then put that final energy on the Darkrai, use the Cyrus to pull it up and snipe it and get it off the board. This is massive for this matchup because this is the card that single-handedly, and in my opinion, makes this matchup a losing matchup. It essentially lets those Oricorios sit on the board twice as long and just gives them the opportunity to set up and pummel us with the Greninja's ability. And so you see here, we get the Dark Rise trigger off or get the energy on the Darkrai, and then we're able to actually Cyrus up the Shaman and just completely snipe it while also dropping that chip damage on the Oricorio. So this is really important in just knowing when do you actually want to drop, where do you want to put the chip damage in before or after you use your Sabrinas and Cyruses. And so having this helmet here on the Darkrai as well is also great because they don't really have any, super consistent ways of keeping the Oricorio healthy. This deck likes to run 2 Iridas in order to do so, but without the Shaman now, they have to be really careful and can't just freely swing into a helmet on our Darkrai, or else they are going to be able to lose that wall way too quick. And because their Greninja is a little slow on getting online, and their Giratina, which is their big finisher that they essentially want to kind of Cyrus up your Pokemon and then use the Giratina to kind of just take it out to close the game out, it was a little bit slow to getting there. And so that gave us time to be able to, once again, chip down this first Oricorio of theirs while also being able to snipe that Shaman and get that first point. So this is looking really, really good for us, but we are by no means out of trouble here. There's a lot that this deck can do against us to essentially whittle us down. Having the Pokemon Center Lady is great because it just gives us a little bit more sustain against those Greninja triggers and keeping this Darkrai alive and healthy. So one of the things you're also going to want to start thinking about doing is, like, how do you kind of dance your Pokemon around so that you are essentially making those Greninja triggers take as long as possible in order to whittle you down, right? So you don't want to leave your Darkrai or leave one of your injured Pokemon up in the lead for too long, or else they can swing into it with that Oricorio and eventually, take out one of your ex-Pokemon and get those 2 points on the board. And so you see that they're able to put their backup Oricorio down. And this is, it's a little bit problematic, but it's not the worst thing that happens here. And so one thing that's important to think about is that we have this Guzma in our hand, and we now have the Oricorio in a place on their active spot where we can use this Guzma, remove the cape, and get rid of it. Now, the reason we want to do this now rather than wait is because A, we know they have Iridas in their deck that they can use to just put this thing right out of KO range, and that would be really, really, really tough for us. We kind of want to take that knockout point now as soon as possible so that we can then start chipping into their backup Oricorio and put that pressure on them. So using that Guzma at that point in time was really smart. A lot of times these decks don't run more than that one cape anyways, so it's not like it's going to really give us a whole lot of value down the road. Now you see here, we're going to go ahead and swap our fresh Darkrai in and go ahead and bring that other one back, so that now the only really way they can pressure it is by Cyrusing it up or using the Greninja triggers. But they won't be able to swing into it with their Oricorio and be able to actually just take that thing out, which would really flip this game on its head. And so the nice thing is that we see that they have electric energy kind of in the next two spots, which means that they can't put water energy on the Oricorio. And if they have the Irida, they can't actually use it to heal up. So this is a really, really important and crucial moment about looking at the energy that's coming up and starting to think about how we play around that, right? So we want to go ahead and keep that Darkrai in the back a little bit more healthy, force them to have to, put it in a range where even if they got their other Greninja online, they wouldn't be able to actually knock it out next turn. They would still require another turn. Once again, we see another electric energy here, and that means that, again, they actually cannot use an Irida on the Oricorio. The Oricorio is about to be done. It needs 2 more chip shots, and we basically captured our last point. So this is a pretty important part about how this game is playing out. And honestly, one of the main reasons why I will most likely come out on top is the fact that they no longer have that ability either with the Shaman that we took out early on or with Irida in order to heal that Oricorio. So a bit unfortunate for my opponent, but like I said, the key thing that you want to do here is essentially keep your Darkrai's as healthy as possible. They are your key weapon in this matchup. You want to then use the Sabrinas and Cyruses to try and actually snipe key or essential Pokemon to their game plan, which are going to be their Greninjas, and it's going to be their Shaman. And if you can get their Shaman early on, that is honestly one of the biggest ways to just bust open this matchup. Otherwise, a lot of times it's just going to whittle you down and you're going to play for like 20 minutes and just lose at the end of it. And honestly, there's few things that feel worse than just grinding it out for that 20-minute game just to be in a position where there's nothing you can do. They're just going to whittle you down, continue healing that Oricorio, and punish you for it. And so you see here with the red in hand, we can just close this game out, collect the final points, and beat that core Oricorio deck that usually kicks our butt. All right, heading into our second matchup here, we see that we're going first, and we take a look at the energy and see that we have grass energy. Now here we want to start game planning. Most likely this is going to be an Arceus deck and with the Carnivine, which is a pretty tough matchup for us. And so fortunately here, when you have the option, you want to lead Giratina because it's not going to be taking that super effective damage from the Carnivine. And also another key thing to think about here is that if you have the ability to actually leave something up as more of a meat shield, so being able to put up like a Giratina in the front and then have like a Giratina and a Darkrai sitting in the back, you power up the ones in the back and you leave the front one up as a meat shield, and ideally you hit your leaf to be able to kind of swap it back out before it gets KO'd, or you just throw a helmet on it, leave it up there and kind of just let it do its damage, sacrifice it, and then hopefully be able to clear the rest of the game out with whatever you've been building up in the back. So you see here, we're kind of leaning on the game plan of let's go ahead and put that lead Giratina up, let's put the helmet on it, have it be a meat shield. Hopefully we can draw into our leaf, otherwise we might just have to sacrifice this Giratina. They're leading Zubat, so honestly not that ideal of a lead. Ideally they want to have that Carnivine in that active spot, and then have the Zubat in the back that they eventually evolve into Crobat, and the Arceus that they can essentially combine with that Crobat to basically wipe just about anything in the meta out with some of those breakpoints and maybe a red, or I've even seen this deck run some Giovannis in the past. So we see here that they've got 2 Zubats down and they're going to start building up that Arceus. The goal for them is to essentially get their Golbat online, power up that Arceus. Pretty straightforward, pretty linear game plan, pretty powerful. This deck has a lot of ways to really just kind of run you over. Getting that other Darkrai in the back, not really that important, except for the fact that at some point we may want to be putting energies on that one and building up our second Darkrai if we get to that point in the game. Now, having that chip damage on that Zubat is pretty important for us, as it, if they do decide to use that one to evolve, our Cyrus becomes active and something that we can use to kind of snipe it once they do evolve it. So we see the rare candy come up. So let's see what they go ahead and evolve. And they choose to evolve the Zubat that has the damage on it. Now, my guess here is the reason they do that is that it actually gives them the ability to then be able to take that Crobat out, retreat it to the bench without needing to use any retreat cost. So pretty, I guess, for them, a decision that they made. Will it come back to hurt them? Probably, because now that we have that Cyrus in hand and we're able to put some more chip damage on it, we can actually just pull that Crobat back up when we want to and clear it out. So now that they've got the 3 energies on their Arceus and they've got the guaranteed 30 damage from the Crobat's ability, they're going to, if they want to, be able to take out my lead Giratina. And they're not going to be able to do it, though, without taking some chip damage from the helmet, which is also important. And so the fact that we have a cape here, we want to start game planning. Like, what are we going to do here? Like, what is the play based off this point that we are in the game? And then we also see that they're putting a cape on the Arceus. Now, this makes our red really, really important. And ideally, having that red in hand to be able to kind of get over the breakpoint that we need to get rid of the Arceus. Or additionally, we need to put the enough energy on the Giratina that we can hit with the Giratina while also getting a trigger off with the Darkrai. Now they Sabrina us here, which is interesting because we do not really want to put up any of our Pokemon that have energy on them. Once again, we're totally okay with putting up a sacrificial lamb instead of it being our Giratina with the helmet. It's now going to be that Darkrai that we're going to have to go ahead and give up. Now, this is something that's super important. We don't really want to swing into the Arceus right now because it is at a breakpoint that we can't clear. But what we can do is we can actually put this cape on our Darkrai to put it out of KO range from the Arceus and the Crobat. We can chip the Arceus to bring it down to a breakpoint that we can now hit with our red. And then we can Cyrus up the Crobat to then clear that out and get it off the board. Now, this is a huge, huge, crucial move in this game that, in my opinion, decides the outcome. So now with that Crobat off the board, they're hard-pressed to get another Crobat online, particularly with only 2 cards in their hand. They also need to fill up their basics in order to have that Arceus, or fill up the bench with that Arceus to be able to hit at full power. So now we're able to just swap the Darkrai right out. We can bring the Giratina up, and now with that red in hand, we can throw it up, and that's game over. And once again, we're able to come back from what would be considered a hard counter matchup. All right, getting into the third matchup here. Looks like we're going to be going first. We see Grass Energy. So once again, we want a game plan here. Fortunately, we're able to put the Giratina up front so that we're not taking that super effective damage in regards to whatever that they bring in. Here, we essentially want to draw into our Darkrai and get that basically on the board so we can start powering up that along with our Giratina at the same time. Now, we see Spirigato, which obviously means that this is going to be a Meowscarada deck, probably paired with one other Pokemon. Sometimes we see Beedrill in there, but anyways, either way, going to be a tough matchup for us, as this is generally a deck that was really built to kind of target the Darkrai Giratina deck last meta, and has obviously still had success now with Rare Candies brought into the fold. So they got both their Spirigatos down. We draw into our Mars, and having that into our hand is great because here we have the perfect opportunity to not only just build out our bench with those Darkrais, but also just to try to disrupt them a little bit. So this is where Mars comes in handy quite a bit, because it gives us the opportunity to essentially try to slow them down, which, their goal is primarily to get their Meowscarada online as quick as possible and basically just run us over. So we're going to go ahead and put the Poison Dart on the Giratina there, and this is going to be important because it allows us to essentially ensure that we get some sort of chip damage off when they do decide to attack into us. So here we're going to see what they're left with now that they had to kind of redraw their hand, and now we're going to actually have to start rebuilding their hand. Looks like they're going to continue to want to, potentially leverage that Spirigato to draw into their deck and pull more of their Pokemon out. Here, we essentially want to potentially, we're thinking about using this Sabrina as a way to basically bring their Florigato up and then, add some chip damage to it. And this comes in handy because if we need to use something like a Cyrus in the late game, we can actually target now both of their Pokemon that has that damage. Now let's also keep in mind though that this deck does run a number of heals, so it's very possible that they're going to be able to actually get one or more of their Meowscaradas once they build them up until full health or close to it. And that's why the Poison Dart is really, really important in this kind of new meta, is when you fight a deck like this, you essentially make your Cyrus, generally much more playable, right? Because you can ensure that at least one of their Pokemon will always have a little bit of damage on it. So if they do move it over to the bench to try to take that poison condition off of it, you're in a good place. Now, drawing into the Guzma is actually also an important element here, knowing that this deck does like to run the new Cape tool that can be applied to grass Pokemon. And so here, having that in our hand is something that just gives us a little bit more versatility. And as we complete this turn, you can see that our Giratina is now at full energy. We're about to basically allow us, putting us in a position where we can actually also hit with Giratina while also putting swinging with a trigger on Darkrai, which is something that will generally give us a lot more power in hitting that break point when it comes to clearing a Meowscarada that they have on there. So looks like they don't have the cape on the Meowscarada. Even if they did, wouldn't have mattered. We would have been able to take it out. And we also have the poison damage that brings them down into a threshold that is okay for us. So this is where the potions and the heals become really important, because now we can essentially hit with the Giratina and not have to worry about the recoil damage KOing it. And so here, this is a pretty key moment where we can now swing into the Meowscarada, clear it, and with the cape in hand, as long as they don't blow our hand up and shuffle the cape back into the deck, we can generally put that on our other Darkrai that has the two energies on it and keep it out of KO range from their Meowscarada. So even though they're able to heal the Meowscarada up right now and put it at full health, we still have essentially our Darkrai sitting on the bench, and all we have to do is be able to survive one hit from the Meowscarada. Now, we need to be thinking about dodging a red here, which these decks tend to run, but I think that you'll see that in this new meta, there's actually a lot fewer of those reds being put into these decks. And so here we're going to go ahead and swing against it. This won't knock them out or KO them, but it does put us in a point in the game where we have to just survive this one hit from them. And if we do, we've essentially won. So as long as they don't have a red here, we should be in good shape and should be able to close this out. We're going to see what they're going to do. They're going to swing into us. They were able to heal up to kind of keep them out of range from that poison damage doing it, but they know that the game is over and we've just taken out one of our hard counters. Moving into our next matchup here, we see that our opponent is playing Dark Energy, and so one of the things we can assume here is it's going to be a mirror or something similar to our mirror. There is a variant that kind of runs, Snorlax or Greninja, but we're going to assume that we're playing the mirror here, and we're left with Giratina to be able to lead, and we do have a Pokeball and Professor's Research in our hand, so our ideal goal is that we really want to draw into Darkrai here, and so having another Professor's Research is nice, but the thing that's a little bit scary here is that these Giratina decks love running red cards and Marses in order to disrupt those stage 2 rare candy decks, and so we got to be careful. Like, we don't really want to give them a bunch of cards in our hand to target, because that could just kill our card advantage here. So there is a potential option where we actually sit on the Professor's Research if there aren't any cards that we're really looking for. And now with two Giratinas and a Darkrai on the board, we kind of have generally what we want. However, we do want to get that Giratina out of the lead. This is a card that we want to have as a sweeper, and losing it first in this matchup just puts Darkrai as your sweeper in the back, and it's just a lot of times not enough firepower. So ideally, we want to draw into something like a Leaf and give us the opportunity to be able to switch out of the Giratina and bring one of our Darkrai's up into the lead. While we do that, we're obviously building up our Giratina. We are powering up our Darkrai. We're chipping their lead Pokemon. They've essentially taken the strategy of using their front Giratina as a meat shield. So most likely they're going to look to want to pull that out. And as you can see, the first Mars comes in, blows up our hand. Fortunately, we only had 4 cards in our hand, so not that amazing card advantage for them. They had to give up a card in order to do that as well, which was the Mars. And so we're just going to Mars them right back, knowing that we actually get an extra card out of this, right? We have one additional card advantage we're able to kind of throw back at them. And so now we're at a point where we actually put the Dark Energy on the Giratina. And that's really important because we want to be in a position where we can actually swing with the Giratina and also trigger the Darkrai trigger. And that way we can hit with that 150. And if we end up actually drawing into our red, 170, which would clear anything on the board. So you can see here they've decided to place that energy on their lead Giratina with the idea that they most likely want to pull that back. Now we are in a position where we don't actually have a full Darkrai powered up, and so we want to play the slow game here. We're most likely going to take our Giratina and move it into the back and move our Darkrai up, and this basically puts us in what I call checkmate position, where we are essentially now just finding the right opportunity to use that front Darkrai to chip down, try to get that first point or two, and then save the Giratina in the back in order to be able to close the game out. And so that's exactly what we're going to do here. You're going to see, instead of actually swinging in with our own Giratina, which honestly just puts it in a position where their Giratina comes in, sweeps it, and now we're left with a Darkrai, which is not powerful enough to clear their own Giratina. So this is a really important part of this matchup that you want to see, and being patient, right? We could have swung, we could have taken out their Giratina, and it would have put us in a very vulnerable position on the backswing. So instead, we're going to put the Poison Darted Darkrai up front, and we're just going to use this to continue to pressure them and force them to have to make a decision. We want to bait them into bringing their own Giratina in, right? And so, that's fine. We're totally happy sacrificing our Darkrai if they want to do that, because then we can bring our own caped Giratina in behind it and basically sweep out the rest of the game. And so here, pretty smart. We're going to go ahead and just, basically try to put our Darkrai in a position where it can actually be, cleared out by an opponent's Darkrai. Once again, we're trying to bait them into bringing their own Giratina in. So now that we've gotten their Giratina low, it does have the 2 energies on it. And this is pretty smart. They're going to do a little bouncing, right? They're going to go ahead. They're going to swap that out. They're going to bring a fully healthy Darkrai in. And they're basically just juggling. They're also trying to find that checkmate position, right? And trying to bait my Giratina in order to swing. Now, ideally we would like to draw into something like a Cyrus or a Sabrina, so that we can actually have a little bit more firepower and a little bit more flexibility into what we want to do here. You're going to see that we have the option to heal up this Darkrai, but feel like, you know what? We're actually just leaving it there to bait anyways. We want to leave the health low. We want to put it in a position where their Giratina could actually sweep it in one hit. And that way we've now successfully baited their Giratina out. And so we're just waiting for that to happen. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like they're taking the bait. However, they can't really afford to lose this Darkrai, right? Like, they don't want to give up those first 2 knockout points, because that's going to put them on their back foot and make them very, very vulnerable to something like a Sabrina or a Cyrus. So here, they're most likely going to try to, hopefully play the Leaf. And so very smart on their part. Surprised it took them that long to figure out to do that. But now they're going to be able to pull that additional Darkrai in that essentially has enough energy on it to swing in and attack. Fortunately, it's not necessarily enough to actually clear us out unless they have a red that they can play on top of it. And it's also going to leave them poisoned. So you can see here they decide not to swing in. They want to actually keep their Darkrai healthy. And once again, they're trying to bait our Giratina in. So now that we pulled the Cyrus, here's where I make a key mistake, right? We know that these Darkrai Giratina decks run a bunch of Mars and red cards. They already played 1 Mars. My assumption was, okay, we haven't seen another Mars or a red card yet. I'm going to go ahead and take the chance that this Cyrus is going to be enough to close this game out, because they have 2 Pokemon on the bench that are very low health. So here what I think about doing is actually bringing my own Giratina in first, sweeping their Darkrai that's on the board with it, baiting their Giratina in, which obviously is extremely dangerous, and then using a Cyrus in order to just go ahead and get the last knockout point on the bench. Now, the mistake I make here is that if they have a Mars or a red card, they can completely blow this plan out of the water. And it leaves me in a position now where their Giratina can take out my Giratina and then basically survive just about anything on the backswing from my Darkrai's and then clear me out. And that's exactly what happens here. We are lucky that we pulled a Sabrina. This is basically this or the Cyrus were the two cards that basically gave us our win condition. So like I said, made a pretty big mistake here by trying to bank on, our hand being protected and not losing that Cyrus, and actually backfired on us. So in hindsight, what I would have done is I would have just kept the Darkrai in, kept swinging with it. But now we can throw that Sabrina up. It's our win condition. They're going to concede, and we take the game. Moving into the final matchup, we see Fighting Energy, and we're going to once again assume that this is most likely the new Garchomp deck that we've been saying all over the ladder. We see the Gible in the lead, and we are correct. And so here we are leading our Giratina, which is not quite that ideal. We generally want to have our Darkrai in the front, chipping, and then eventually swinging with it while we power up the Giratina in the back, but that's not really an option here. So what we're might have to end up doing is actually using the Giratina as bait and as a meat shield, and really hope to actually be able to clean the game out with the Darkrai. Now this is the one matchup where that's actually very possible. While the Garchomp does have a lot of flexibility and its two different attacks, it doesn't really hit that hard. And so the Darkrai can definitely put up a really, really strong fight. And so here you'll see that they have the fossil down, and we were able to Mars them pretty early on. And this was great because this, gives us the opportunity to potentially disrupt their hand and slow them down. Now we're building up energy on the Giratina. If we need to, we can obviously swap that out and retreat that and bring the Darkrai up. We've got the chip damage on the Gible. And so we'll just see here if they actually have the combination of cards that they need in order to put pressure on us. And so it looks like they are able to get right into that Rampardos, drop the energy on it, bring the Gible back, and swing right into us. And they're going to hit us for a whopping 130 right now. This is where our plan changes, right? So we know that after we put this energy on our Darkrai, we're one energy away from being able to swing. We also know that if they decide to swing into our Giratina with their Rampardos, they're going to take recoil damage. And that puts them in range where our Darkrai can actually clear them out without any issues, even if they decided that they wanted to put a cape on it as well. So we have a lot of options, right? If you look at our hand, we have a Cyrus, we have Pokemon Center Lady, we've got Sabrina and Red. Red might come in handy later if they decide to get their Garchomp online. And so we're just going to go ahead and put that energy on the Giratina, and we're just going to leave it there as bait, right? We want them to swing into this. We want them to take the recoil damage. That's kind of the best case scenario for us. So they are able to get their Gabite online, which means that it's very possible they will have a Garchomp to follow up on this. The fact that they swing in like this with the Rampardos, knowing that they're essentially sacrificing it, makes me believe that they do have a Garchomp they're going to be able to bring online next turn. Now, if we think about it, they're not going to be able to hit for the full 100 attack on the Garchomp, even if they can get it online after we clear out this Rampardos, which means that they'll be able to hit for 50 and then 100. Fortunately, we have the Pokemon Center Lady, which will allow us to be able to survive 2 attacks from the Garchomp. So we're in a really, really good position here. And we're just kind of thinking a few turns ahead to kind of see what happens, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put that energy on the Darkrai. We're going to clear out the Rampardos, and we're going to go ahead and draw more cards into our hand and see what we're working with. And so here, not really a whole lot that's really going to help us. I guess we can put the Rocky Helmet on the Darkrai to ensure that if they do decide to swing into our lead Darkrai, they are going to take recoil damage, and they're going to take that recoil chip damage. So they bring the Gabite up. Let's see, most likely they have the Garchomp. They're going to evolve into it. They're going to drop the energy on it, and they have to make a decision on who they want to attack and what they want to attack for. We get hit with a Mars, which is a little unfortunate. We did have a pretty great hand there with a lot of flexibility, but to be honest, we didn't really need any of that, right? Our goal is essentially to just try to survive this next attack from the Garchomp, and the potion is exactly what we need here, right? This literally puts us 10 HP above that breakpoint threshold, and that right there is literally going to be what decides this game, right? So we can now swing in with the Darkrai. That's going to essentially put them about in range where even if they did, heal it up with the new elite trainer, they are still not going to be out of range of our Darkrai. So the opponent knows this and concedes. So to quickly summarize, you can see after watching my walkthrough of those core key matchups just how strong this deck is yet again. And so if you're looking to grind into Master Ball or beyond, I highly recommend that you learn the ins and outs of this deck, its key matchups, and I'm sure you will have tons of success. As I mentioned, I took this deck to a 20-1 record on 2 10-game win streaks, a 95% win rate into the top 5,000 players of Master Ball, and I was amazed at how much consistency and how strong this deck still is in the new meta. So I appreciate you making it this far. If you enjoyed this content and want to see more like it, hit the like button below and subscribe to the channel so you can get notified of when I make new content just like this. And if you're looking for ways to improve your overall gameplay and limit the impact that RNG has on it, I highly recommend you take a look at this video where I walk through the top tips, tricks, and strategies that expert players use in order to successfully grind to the top ranks of Master Ball on the backs of extremely high win rates. Appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one.